and we're listening to Malcolm X. We're going to accept calls from you on Trinity 81023 and 24 sometime after 12:07. Malcolm?
Yes, one of the things that I noticed, especially when I arrived in Nigeria, was the wealth, the beauty, the natural beauty, and the natural wealth. And when you go to Nigeria and see how beautiful it is, and see the extent of its natural wealth, you can easily see that it would be impossible for the Europeans to have left Nigeria so peacefully. You will find wherever you go in this on this wealthy continent, the whites are still there. They are in a different way, but their presence is still felt. They refer to Nigeria and Kenya, but in this particular case it was Nigeria, as one of the wealthiest parts of Africa. The wealth is untapped. It's virgin wealth. And many of the vast corporations in this country have moved into the gap, supposedly, or vacuum, supposedly created by the departure of the British. And in order to move in, what they have done, to keep this vacuum and to keep the Afro-Americans from being aware of this wealth or the potential that's there, they automatically paint a negative picture in my mind, or our mind in this country, that is the Afro-American mind, but wherein at the same time, when you go to Nigeria, you find many white Americans there, white Americans living there, many of them as teachers and in other capacities, and they're living like they live in Miami Beach, because Nigeria, the closest thing you have in America to any of the parts of Africa that I went to are Miami Beach and Southern California. When you go to Africa, the only thing in America comparable is Miami Beach in Southern California. And Southern California and Miami Beach are the places in America where it costs more to live because of the beauty and the climate and things of that sort. Well, Africa is the same way. So what has happened, many of the whites in this country who are teachers have accepted or taken advantage of the opportunity to migrate to Africa. And they're living there, they occupy good positions, they're making good salaries, and their living conditions couldn't be better. It's just like they're taking a vacation. And the only reason that so many whites are able to take advantage of this opportunity is because the average Afro-American who's a teacher or who is a professional has been given such a negative image of Africa, they don't think of Africa in terms of the future or in terms of opportunity. And this is not an accident. This is the result of very skillfully concocted and perpetuated propaganda on the part of the United States government itself to keep the black man in this country begging, while the whites are then able to go into our homeland and live like kings. And one of the things that I noticed also in both Ghana and Nigeria, these Negroes in this country who are always begging for integration, if they want to integrate with the white man, the best place for them to go is Africa. Because you got more white people in Africa over there shaking black hands, smiling in the black man's face over there, trying to get along with him because they realize that's the wealthiest continent on this earth. And as strange as it may seem, the same white people who in this country are sicking their dogs on us and beating us with their clubs and washing us down sewers with their fire hoses, when we try and integrate with them, in their white country, they go to the black country and try and integrate with our brothers and sisters who are darker than we are. So these are some of the things that I noticed. And another thing that I noticed, and I came back to America firmly convinced of, and that is the failure of Afro-American organizations, whether they are political, religious, or civic, to send representatives onto the African continent, to try and set up lines of communication, to create better understanding and a closer working relationship between our people there and our people here. The failure to do this is one of the things that has resulted in the slowness, the slow pace that we've been traveling at in our so-called civil rights struggle for the past 10 years. If these organizations, and when I say organizations, I include all of them, those to which I have belonged, and myself included, we have been very narrow-minded. The Negro leaders have been narrow-minded. The Negro organizations have been narrow-minded. And the average Negro leader in this country, myself included, and the average organization in this country has been so selfish and so subjective in its approach to the problem of the Afro-American that their scope hasn't even been broad enough to see how big the problem is. So that by not realizing how big this, by not being big enough, intellectually or otherwise, to see how big the problem is, it has been impossible up to now for the Negro leaders and the Negro organizations to solve the problem. They don't even know how big it is. So by bigness, I mean we have to develop the type of bigness that is necessary to submerge our own little personal shortcomings and try and work in unity in some way or other, in some kind of coalition to form some kind of united front that will enable us to come up with a solution that will solve the problem for all of our people once and for all.
He's returned from an extensive trip and is making his first public appearance over the listing post tonight since his return. Malcolm?
Yes, the country in Africa that impressed me the most with its progressiveness was Ghana. And Ghana, it's not an accident that Ghana is the country in Africa that the white man here in the West seems to be the most worried about. It's actually the most progressive. The attitude when you arrive in Ghana, you can see, is an attitude of confidence among the Ghanaians. And while I was there, I had an opportunity to speak at the University of Accra in Legon, outside of Ghana, and also at the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute in Winneba, which is a little farther away from Accra. Also, I had a chance to speak before the Ghanaian members of parliament, and also to President Nkrumah himself. And in each of these occasions, most of my time was spent describing the true plight of the black people in this country and the hypocrisy of the American government in dealing with the problem, and the inability of the American government to really and truly deal with this problem. And while I was in Ghana, since Ghana is actually the one country in Africa where you have where everyone is headquartered, and I had an opportunity, I believe, to speak to around 15 different ambassadors from different countries, and on nothing but the race problem in this country and why these countries have been so silent on it at the governmental level, while at the same time they're so vocal on the situation that exists in South Africa and Angola. The defense minister of Ghana, Kofi Bako, gave a dinner in my honor at which I had an opportunity to meet most of the African, the very prominent and influential African leaders. And I might add, to show you what a down-to-earth this particular man is, he's the counterpart of in his country, of McNamara in this country. And in the car that I was leaving his home in stalled, and this man is so down to earth, he got out and pushed it. He was pushing our car to try and help us get it started. And I very much doubt if you find very many people in other countries of his particular position who would do the same thing. Yet at the same time, you hear all of this propaganda in America about the type of government that the Ghanaians have over them. When you go there, you find that all of them make you relax. They're down-to-earth persons. They're not what you call a dictator. They don't throw their weight around. But at the same time that they don't throw their weight around, they let you know that they're confident in their ability to guide their country in the right direction, and in a direction that is of most benefit to the Ghanaian people. I was given also dinners. There were dinners given in my honor also by the Nigerian ambassador, the Chinese ambassador, the Cuban ambassador, and the Algerian ambassador. And one thing I noticed about the Chinese ambassador, and I don't mean Chiang Kai-shek's man, this is the man who represents 800 million Chinese. I had tea at his home with his wife and his family, and later, the next day, he gave a dinner in my honor at the Chinese embassy, to which other ambassadors were invited. And one of the things that impressed me about this man was he had a working knowledge of practically everything involving race affairs in this country. He could tell me the leader of the struggle in Danville, Virginia, whose name I don't know. He could tell me the names of Negro leaders at the local level across the country. They were right at his fingertips, which shows he was studying the race problem in this country closer than many of the Negro leaders in this country have studied it. And the man impressed me with his knowledge and his sincerity, and he didn't fail to remind me that his head of state, Mao Zedong, was one of the first, if not the only, head of state who outright openly, in a language not cloaked in diplomacy, through his weight and the weight of 800 million Chinese behind the black people in this country in our struggle for freedom. But at the time that he did it, he was rebuked by the so-called Negro so-called leaders. So I took the opportunity to point out to the ambassador that he just sent his letter of moral support to the wrong leader, because there are other black people in this country who are not so dumb that they don't realize the old African saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And when the Negro leadership in this country realizes that, they'll be able to devise more tactics and wiser strategy in dealing with an enemy, because we are up against a very brutal enemy. Anyone who deprives you of your rights is an enemy. And I might also point out, and I cite these things just to show the concern and the interest on the part of our people abroad. The morning that I left Accra for Senegal and for Morocco, there were 5 of these African ambassadors came to the airport with me to see me off. And it was an act actually to show that not only they, but their governments and their people were interested in the Afro-American struggle for freedom. And one of the things that I was trying to impress upon them while I was there was our effort this year. We knew that in the past, and they pointed this out, that in the past they couldn't intervene. They couldn't in any way show too much support in our struggle, because the Afro-American leaders had made the mistake of labeling our struggle a civil rights struggle. And as long as it was labeled a civil rights struggle, it was a domestic issue which came under the jurisdiction of the United States government, and no outside power could intervene. So we impressed upon them, I tried to impress upon them, that the Afro-American leaders, the various groups this year, were going to get together and take the label, civil rights label, off our struggle and shift it to the level of human rights. And once it is at the level of human rights, instead of it being a domestic or national issue, it becomes an international issue. And it puts us in a position to take the United States government into the United Nations or into world court and charge Uncle Sam with being guilty of violating our human rights, which means he's violating the UN Charter. He's violating the UN Covenant on human rights. He's violating the Declaration of Human Rights. And all of them agree that once our problem is shifted to the level of human rights instead of civil rights, then immediately it leaves the floodgates open for every other country on this earth to open up their mouths at the governmental level and give whatever assistance they can to the struggle of the black people in this country for human rights, human recognition, and human dignity. So I left Africa feeling well satisfied that the day the black people in this country are able to identify, or the day that we are able to realize that we have brothers abroad in Africa, Asia, and in Latin America, it'll bring a new direction to the struggle of the black people in this country. And one of the other things that were pointed out to me, there's been much talk about migration back to Africa, physical migration back to Africa. After traveling through Africa and discussing that particular phase of the problem with many African diplomats and statesmen, I came away with the conclusion that they would be happy to welcome our people back. But at the same time, many of them suggested that it would be wiser for our people to work, since our people have made the contribution in this particular country that has made this country what it is. We have a stake in it. We have something coming here. And it would be wiser for us to force this country to live up to what it professes to represent in its constitution and in its so-called beautiful declarations of independence and other things. And those who want to migrate back, well and good. Those who want to stay here, well and good. But the migration back to Africa should be, if you notice, the Jews in this country have stayed in this country physically. But their migration back to Israel has been a philosophical migration, a cultural migration, a psychological migration, meaning that they have linked hands spiritually with Israel while remaining here physically. But this spiritual link with Israel has given them the prestige and the incentive that has enabled them to enhance their position here politically, economically, socially, and otherwise. And those who are here help the Jews who are in Israel, and those who are in Israel help the Jews who are here. When our people begin to look at this thing as it is and realize that there are probably that Afro-Americans aren't only in the United States, because Latin America is America, South America is America. Brazil has two-thirds of the population of the people in Brazil are people of African descent, which means they are Afro-Americans. Venezuela the same way. Honduras, Cuba, all through the Caribbean, and in Canada we have Afro-Americans. And when you total up the number of people in the Western Hemisphere of African descent, you probably find that there are over 100 million Afro-Americans here in the Western Hemisphere, and the white man knows that. But he skillfully has prevented any organizations or any coalition of organizations here in the Western Hemisphere from making any effort to unite the people of the United States with the people of African descent in the West Indies, the people of African descent in Latin America, and in Central America and South America. But when we realize the power that we have here numerically, then and we study the Nkrumah doctrine of Pan-Africanism, which means all the good that they do is not only for the Africans at home, but also for the Africans abroad, we can see that our philosophical migration, though we stay here in the Western Hemisphere physically, our philosophical, our cultural, our psychological migration back to Africa, which means we establish our spiritual ties with Africa, our cultural ties with Africa, while just the establishing of this type of bridge, this type of communication, and this type of bond will be very, very helpful in enabling the people of African descent here in the United States to gain probably one of the strongest political, economic, and social positions that has ever been occupied by a strange people in a strange land since the beginning of the world.
That was Malcolm X.
Way over in Lebanon, at the American University of Beirut, and rather near the American University of Beirut, and some students from the Sudan made it possible for me to give a lecture at the Sudanese Culturals, which was attended by most of the students and the faculty from the American University of Beirut. And at this lecture, it gave me my first chance to really feel the pulse of what the African reaction is like when they are given a true picture of the plight of the Afro-American. And there was one white American stood up and tried to defend America in a sense, after I had described our plight, which he couldn't defend it. And he looked so bad trying to, that after he sat down, he held his head. During the rest of the meeting, he sat there with his head down, with shame, with disgrace. And any time, and I learned, and also a American Negro girl, she stood up too and tried to defend America. And I felt sorry for her, and I didn't even have to blast her, because there happened to be another American Negro in the audience who stood up and sat her down, but good. So I found that anywhere I went, if someone tried to attack me for being very blunt and frank and vocal about our problem, there was always someone in the audience ready to put them down. And I called my wife from Cairo, and she told me that it was reported, at least in New York, by the press, that my lecture in Beirut had caused a riot among the students, which was the boldest lie, probably, one of the boldest lies, they've told so many, that have ever been told in this country by anyone. Because the only riotous situation that took place was them crowding around afterwards, to thank me for letting them know what was really going on over here. And when I was in Nigeria, I spoke at the University of Ibadan, which is a beautiful African school in Nigeria. And I did the same thing. I indicted America, really, by just describing the real plight of the black people in this country. And after I had given this lecture, a Negro stood up from the Caribbean area here and tried again to attack me. The students came up on the speaker stand, took the microphone away from him, ran him not only off the stand, ran him out of the hall and off the campus, and would have lynched him had not Essien Udom, the one who went to school in this country and wrote the book Black Nationalism, come to his rescue. And I cite this to show you that any time the African or the Asian or the Latin American is given a true description of the hell and the torture that black people face in America, why it is impossible for anyone to stand up and defend America without running the risk of being lynched abroad. So these are things that I think are good to know, and I cite them very bluntly so that our people in this country will realize that we shouldn't be fighting our struggle for independence and for the liberation of our people as if we're the underdogs. Everybody on this earth is on our side who has a true understanding and knowledge of the nature of the plight or the struggle that we're facing. Another thing I noticed when I was in Mecca, in Arabia, during the Hajj, during the pilgrimage, and it was my stay in Arabia. I stayed in Arabia so long that originally I had intended to leave Mecca and go back to Cairo through Khartoum and visit Kenya, Tanganyika, Zanzibar, and Uganda before going to West Africa. But when I got to Arabia, I was informed by Mohammed Faisal, the son of Prince Faisal, who is the ruler of Arabia, that I was to be a state guest. So that during the entire 12 days that I was in Arabia, I was the guest of the Arabian ruler who put me in a suite at the Jeddah Palace Hotel, the most beautiful place I've ever been, and put a car at my disposal with a chauffeur and a muallim, a religious guide, who then and also made it possible for me to commute back and forth between Jeddah and Mecca and Medina and the other holy cities in Arabia almost at will. And it was the nature of my stay in Arabia that was prolonged that made it imperative that I cancel my entire East African journey and go on into West Africa. And I might point out that I learned more about the religion of Islam, the Orthodox religion of Islam, while I was in Arabia than I ever dreamt. And it did have a great influence on much of my thinking today. And I also was able to see while I was there why Islam has been more effective in establishing brotherhood among mankind than any other religion. And what actually had sent me to Mecca was one of the messenger's sons, Minister Wallace Muhammad, the brother who used to be the minister right here in Philadelphia. He had told me back in February of 1963 of the importance of the Muslims in the Muslim movement getting a better understanding of the Orthodox religion of Islam, getting a better spiritual understanding of the religion of Islam as it is actually practiced in the Muslim world. And at that time, I contended with him. I wasn't receptive to what he was saying because there were other things that he said wherein I thought he was wrong. But I lived to see that everything he told me at that time was 1,000% true. And the best advice anybody ever gave me was the advice he gave me when he encouraged me to make the trip to the holy city of Mecca. And as I say, the religious experience itself gave me a broader approach, I think. I think it broadened my scope. One of the things that shocked me when I got to Mecca, I saw white people in Mecca. I had always been taught that they didn't have white people over there, and I believe that because you can't go by anything other than what you're taught if you've never been taught otherwise. But the thing about these white people, they weren't white like you find white people in this country. They were white in color, but their attitude was different. I noticed that during the religious pilgrimage, there were occasions, and many occasions, where I was eating from the same plate with people who in this country would be considered white. Their eyes were blue, their hair was blonde, their skin was white, but their attitude was different. And I wondered about this, and I studied it very closely. because the Afro-American, whether he realizes it or not, whatever experience he finds himself in, usually the yardstick that he uses to measure it is the attitude of racism. We are the victims of racism to such extent. So the average one of us, wherever we go, we have our feeler out to find out what's the score here. And usually we want to know, is this man really a brother or is he just pretending? And I studied and I noticed that people of all complexions were getting along in unity and harmony, from the whitest white person to the blackest black person. And I tried to come to some conclusion as to what would make a person who looked white here in the Muslim world be so much different from the man that is white here in the Western world that I just left. And I could see that because this particular person had accepted Allah, which means one God, or the chain reaction or logical conclusion means also that he has to accept all people on this earth as one people or belonging to one human family. By accepting Allah or one God, one has to accept the oneness of the human family. And when one accepts the oneness of the human family, then one realizes rather that the various complexions are only the varying degrees of people and how they look that it takes to make up this human family. And by looking upon all as the same, the people who appear to be white don't regard themselves as white in the same way that the white man in this country does. And I could see then that white is more of an attitude than it is a color. And the white man in this country is distinguishable from whites over there by his attitude. His attitude. When the white man in this country says he's white, he means something much different from the white man over there who says he's white. When that man over there says he's white, he means that his skin happens to be lighter than the skin of the others, and that's all. But when the white man in America says he's white, if you listen to the tone of his voice, he's saying, I'm the boss. I'm the best one. I'm the one who's on top. He's bragging about the color of his skin. Whereas when a man over there tells you he's white, this is just an incidental adjective that he uses to describe his complexion, but it has nothing to do with his position. It has nothing to do with his brain content or anything of that sort. And I did feel that if the religion of Islam could do for those white people over there, or so-called white people over there, if it could remove the white from their mind, as it has, perhaps if the white man here in America would study the religion of Islam and get a better understanding of it in time, maybe he could change his racist attitude and save himself from the inevitable destruction that his country must meet as long as this attitude of racism prevails here in America. And America has the most deeply ingrained attitude of racism than exists in any country anywhere else on this earth.
Including South Africa?
Worse than South Africa, because the South Africans are at least gentlemen enough to say that they are racist. They preach segregation and practice segregation. But these Americans are such hypocrites. They have the audacity to say they're preaching democracy while they're actually practicing hypocrisy. They preach integration and practice segregation. So I think when you look all over this earth, the South Africans should be worthy of much more respect than the Americans, because at least the South Africans practice what they preach while the Americans preach one thing and practice another thing.
I'm going to open the phones to you now as we move along with the program and give you an opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the guest. Trinity 81023 and Trinity 81024, those are the numbers to call. I'm going to ask you to make one call tonight, please, in 2 minutes only for any caller. One call in 2 minutes. The segment of the program brought to you by...
And trying to become more acceptable in the eyes of our president. I would also like to say this, that he's the first of our leaders whom I've heard mention anything at all about the stand of the Afro-American in other parts of the world in relation to our position. The Afro-American within the United States has taken the defensive and appears to have rejected the help of his brethren in other countries, for example, Cuba, Brazil, and even in Ghana, where they've labeled Nkrumah as a combination of the devil and atheist. So I would just like to say in conclusion that Brother Malcolm, keep up the good work. See if you can get through to some of the other leaders. Thank you.
May I make a quick comment on something he said? When he said that they try and make Nkrumah look like a combination between a devil and an atheist, I think that's what he said. I spoke with Nkrumah, President Nkrumah, for an hour, and the last thing that he said to me when I was going out the door was, "May God bless you." Now, I don't know what kind of atheist would use such expression. I found the man to be a very religious man.
Joe Rainey. Yes?
Saladin Abdul Malik.
Yes?
And I want to express great thanks having Brother Malcolm on your program. And I say that he has expressed himself tonight better than ever before in the past that I've ever heard him. And I have just 2 or 3 questions that I think that might be important.
Well, you've got 2 minutes now. Can you get 3 questions in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'll try my best. I'm timing myself. What suggestions does he make to Negro leaders to bring about the unity which will be necessary to bring our fight to the forefront? And the next one is, what is his new outlook and what is his personal intentions as a Muslim in regards to other Muslims here in the United States? And the third question is that in listening to him, I was led to believe that he might have been misled or misguided in some respect in the past, and it appears that he has made new ideas since he made this trip overseas to Mecca in Africa. And I thank you, and this is the thing I'd like to know, and may Allah bless him.
Well, the Afro-American leaders in this country first have to realize, not only as individuals but also as organizations, that there is no one man wise enough or with a vast amount enough knowledge to really see the problem in its entirety as it actually is. There's no one organization with a scope broad enough to see the problem in its entirety as it actually is. And I think that when it is realized that it'll take more than individuals to solve the problem, then this combination of individuals will get together and discuss it more objectively, not through the eyes of their organizations, but as the problem actually is, and it will be easier to submerge their differences then and try and reach some kind of solution. I frankly believe, and I've made this mistake, from having to represent an organization and therefore looking at the problem through the eyes of an organization, I've made the mistake of giving a call to Negro leaders to unite, and then I would have to qualify it by saying we will unite with them as long as we're not asked to compromise our religious principles. Well, this right here eliminates chances of unity. The problem is too big for one organization. And if I say to some Negroes, let's unite, and we can do it, but if it goes beyond the scope or the principles of our organization, then I'm more interested in the organization than I am in a solution to the problem. If you come to me with a solution and you prove to me that it is a solution, I shouldn't care what my organization represents if I'm really looking for a solution to the problem. So most Negro organizations are interested in solutions only as long as the solution will enhance the prestige of their particular organization or their particular self. So what we have to do is see the complexity of this problem and the vastness of it. And then we will realize that we are going to have to forget some of these so-called organizational principles and organizational aims and objectives, and realize that the real principle and the real aim and the real objective is a solution to the problem. Everything else can be put right down the drain. If you got some principles that won't help us to solve this problem, then you have the wrong principles. And this is my reaction from having traveled abroad, and I just think that it broadened my scope. And I also realize that as a representative of a religious organization in the past, how organizational approaches usually are so narrow that it's impossible to see the problem or enough of the problem to come up with an answer that will cover the whole thing and enable us to reach a solution. And what is as far as my attitude toward other Muslim groups is concerned, When I was in, as I said earlier, when I was in on the religious pilgrimage, the Hajj to Mecca, one of the things that I was standing on the steps in Mecca, on the steps of the house where I was staying in Mecca one day, and a member of the Turkish parliament who had led the Turkish Muslims to Mecca we were in conversation together, and he pointed out, it was actually he who pointed out, he's a very learned man, that that this particular area, Mecca, during the Hajj season would be an anthropologist's paradise, because you have an opportunity to see every specimen of humanity. And it's probably the only time in history and the only spot on earth where you can see every specimen of humanity represented at the same time. From the whitest white to the blackest black. Every culture is represented there. And realizing that Islam is a religion that brings all these people together and enables them to work in harmony and unity toward one common objective because they believe in one God, I frankly believe that if all of the people in this country were able to broaden their scope to that level, it would be possible to formulate some kind of working unity that would enable us to see broad enough to get some kind of solutions to our problem, religiously, politically, economically, socially, academically, intellectually, and otherwise. And I should point out, too, that one of the things that where he says that I think I was misled in the past. Yes, I must admit that I was, and I probably never would have said this before making the pilgrimage, because when you separate from an organization, it's just like a man separating from his wife. At first, the separation is physical, but it's not really psychological. You separate from her, and though you are separated, you still have some strong feelings and thoughts about her, so you're still subjective whenever you think about her. But after you have been separated physically for long enough, then the physical separation also evolves to a psychological separation. And it's the same when a person separates from an organization, whether it's religious, political, fraternal, or otherwise. At first, it's a physical separation. But after that separation has existed for a while, it becomes a psychological separation, and you retain your objectivity, your ability to be objective. And it was this, I think that this is probably one of the effects that the amount of time that has passed since I separated from the organization to which I formerly belonged, plus the distance that I traveled abroad trying to learn more about the religion of Islam, it was possible then for me to look back at some of the religious conclusions that I had come to prior to making this journey, and I found that many of my conclusions were either incorrect and in many cases immature, and in other cases they were right. But by and large, I think that my entire outlook, religiously, politically, economically, socially, and even racially, is much different than it was before I went abroad.
Joe Rainey.
Mrs. White?
Yes, Mrs. White.
Okay. I would like to ask this question and question him. I sincerely think that this Malcolm X, as he puts it, thinks so much of these other countries he talks about. I don't think he will be happy in any other country but one of them. Then why, if he is so against, or I presume he was born in this terrible country, because it's terrible about America, why don't he leave it? And as far as the wife being so anxious, as he has said, in shaking hands with the Negroes in the other country, I would like to tell him I'm shaking hands with Negroes because when I did, there were no difference in my color, the person himself. But I also would shake hands with everyone because of color. What is his excuse? Thank you.
If I understood her correctly, she was implying as to why I would think that this country, this good country as she described it, is so bad, and at the same time, why don't I leave? It's easy for me to leave, and I doubt that there's any country on the African continent in which I couldn't live, other than perhaps South Africa, and I frankly believe I could live there. I could live there because I would stir up our people there and try and bring about a change, and not nonviolently. Anytime you comprise 11 million of the people and you only got 2 million people who are a minority ruling you, it's only because you have the wrong philosophy. So, insofar as going someplace else and living someplace else, that's very easy for me to do. But at the same time, I have to take into consideration that our people collectively have a problem here. And me being able to go someplace and live comfortably and happily, I don't think that I could ever do it. My mind couldn't rest as long as I knew that our people were still in this country being bitten by police dogs and brutalized by the clubs of police and washed down the sewer by the fire hoses of the people in this good country, as she calls it. So, when I was in Accra, I met many Afro-Americans who were over there who had been very strong fighters while they were in this country. And they had escaped. They went over there as expatriates, as exiles. And they were living very happy. They were some of the most progressive people here. They're over there now in Ghana living happy. So I actually insulted them because I was asking them how could they know that our people in this country are catching so much hell, and they live over there like the battle is over. Well, it struck their conscience, and having struck their conscience, they were able to see that the people from South Africa who lived in Ghana had formed freedom fighters headquarters, and the people from Angola who lived in Ghana had formed freedom fighters headquarters. So having stirred them up, I think you'll be reading soon where the Afro-American over there in all of those countries is also setting up headquarters of Afro-American freedom fighters who are becoming interested as fighting for the freedom and the liberation of the blacks in this country who are being colonized by the American white man. The same as the blacks in South Africa are colonized by that white man, and the blacks in Angola are also colonized by that white man. So the problem will be solved as soon as we wake up and realize that we catch as much hell here as we catch it abroad. And as long as one black person is catching hell, all of us are catching hell. And just for one to escape and go to another country doesn't solve the problem. All of us have to have our problem solved, or the problem has not been solved for anyone.
Joe Rainey.
Hello, Mr. Rainey. This is Quitman X.
Yes, Quitman X.
I would like to refer my remarks to the public in general and you. I recall some time ago that I had heard a minister who during that time was referred to as Malcolm X. One of the times when I had first come into the Nation of Islam, he used to be very convincing of the teaching of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, whom I believed in then and I still believe in. Now, I heard Malcolm Little tonight make a speech about no organization or no man in the United States has broad enough in scope and mind to know our problems. Now, and so much as I know that Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and he professed to be a Muslim. Now, he professed, that is, you understand? Now, I would like to know, what is he saying? Is he saying that God himself is not broad enough in scope, or he got a better plan than God Almighty? Of course, I'm not talking to him as I don't talk to traders anyway. You see what I mean? But, I would like to know, when did he turn a hypocrite? Was it then when he was so convincing, or is it now?
Does he want me to answer?
Yeah.
Here's a person who is reflecting the same thing that I'm glad I escaped from. It's true. There's nobody in America who has ever been able to represent the black Muslim movement and Mr. Muhammad in the manner that I have. In fact, I think most objective students of that organization will agree that had I not represented it as religiously and sincerely as I did, it probably would still remain unheard of today. So instead of this brother, who was probably well-meaning but guided by his own lack of knowledge and understanding, being ignorant enough to jump on a public microphone and challenge me, he should have asked himself, what was it that caused me to turn? I gave him a hint a little while ago when I said that a separation, when it takes place physically, doesn't always take place psychologically. Had he asked me the same question three months ago, I would have given him a different answer, but my separation today is psychological as well as physical. He probably should have been able to determine that just from analyzing the type of talking that I've been doing here tonight. I very carefully avoided having anything negative to say about the black Muslim movement. If he was intelligent, he wouldn't have brought that up. But since he has, I have to answer him. I always represented the black Muslim movement because of its ability to reform the morals of our people. This is the strongest accomplishment that most of the objective critics of it have to admit. The social scientists, the psychologists, the criminologists, almost everyone who deals with the vices that destroy the moral fiber of society agree that one of the things that the black Muslim movement has done, it has eliminated these vices. So this was my strongest stick, and I would use it against anyone. But as I said, it was something that Minister Wallace Muhammad told me that made me realize that I had to start trying to get a better understanding of Orthodox Islam. And what he told me not only caused me to be put out, because I never did leave the Nation of Islam. I was put out. Not only was I put out, but he was put out for telling me what he told me. And 6 of the brothers, or a couple carloads of brothers from Philadelphia, went to Chicago to see Minister Wallace Muhammad just a couple days ago. And they came back to the city and were put out of the mosque last night because he told them the same thing he told me. And it only boils down to one of the young teenage sisters left Detroit and became a secretary in Chicago in 1956, and she became pregnant. And we have a strong law in Islam, in the Muslim movement, whereas if anybody, man or woman, has any kind of sexual relations with someone to whom they are not married, automatically they are given time. They're put in isolation. They go before our court. They're brought before the Muslim body. They are humiliated. They are actually disgraced and put in isolation from 1 to 5 years. And this happened to this young sister. She was humiliated and sent back to Detroit. So a year later, a teenage sister left Lansing, Michigan, and went to Chicago, and again became one of the personal secretaries there. And within a year's time, she had become pregnant, and she was brought before the Muslim body and humiliated and disgraced and put in isolation. And in both of these occasions, everyone took it for granted that it must have been some non-Muslim who had betrayed her. So by 1957, we had grown so rapidly across the country until it became necessary to hire about 8 secretaries in the headquarters in Chicago. All of them were teenagers. 2 of them were right here from Philadelphia. 2 of the most prominent sisters of this city moved to Chicago, thinking that they were going to a place where they would become morally strengthened, morally enlightened, and things of that sort. And how they escaped what happened, I don't know, but from what I understand, they did escape. And they came back to Philadelphia and retained their moral convictions. But in 1959, 4 of these 8 secretaries disappeared. I should say 6 of them disappeared. 2 of them came back to Philadelphia. 4 of them disappeared for good. They turned up in 1960, and all 4 of them had babies. They were pregnant. And they were brought before the Muslim community there in Chicago and were humiliated. They were disgraced. They went through the general procedure. And because none of them ever pointed out who the father of their children was, it was taken for granted that it was some non-Muslim. So I knew nothing about it. I was suspicious, but my own religion made me spooky. I thought if I really concentrated on the knowledge that was in front of me, that Allah would chastise me. I wouldn't even let facts register in my intelligence. But it was when Minister Wallace Muhammad came out of prison in 1963, he pulled me aside and told me who was the father of those children. Of
all of them?
Yes. The same man was the father of all 6. The same man violated and spoiled all 6. And this is a fact. And it was when Minister...
He was in the field for secretaries.
Well, he certainly was.
Keep my secretary away from him.
It was when Minister Muhammad told me this that I almost was ready for Byberry. I couldn't believe it. But it put me in a position where I could not honestly defend the black Muslim movement as a moral movement anymore. But rather than say anything about it, I kept it to myself until they were afraid with me having this knowledge. And it was when Kennedy was assassinated that they used that as a pretext to get rid of me, and I still kept it to myself. I tried to protect them all the way down the line. But if you read every edition of the paper that they put out, even in the face of my effort to protect them, they have maligned me and slandered me and talked about me like a dog. And there's a lot of the poor ignorant Muslims who aren't really to blame because they don't know what went on. But if they would take time just to ask Minister find out why isn't Minister Wallace Muhammad in the Nation of Islam? He was put out with me. And if this brother wants to label me as a hypocrite, he'd have to label everybody else who was put out with me as a hypocrite. And I wouldn't even be talking on this right now, but it's ignorance like this that forces you sometimes to have to expose it.
Well, what are you doing in this spring weather? Hello, Mr. Bradshaw.
I want to say to begin with, one of the most painful things just happened to me when I heard Malcolm X recite those incidents about what happened in Chicago. As you know, I am a Roman Catholic, but I have always admired Malcolm X because, in my opinion, he has done more than most men in our time to bring to the Negro a sense of respect in racial terms for himself. It would seem to me that it would have been better had he not said the things that he did say. I'm going to quote the Quran. I'm not a student of it, but I happened to pick this up the other day. Surah 5, where it says, "We ordain therein life for life, an eye for an eye, nose for a nose, an ear for an ear, tooth for a tooth, etc., equal for equal. But if any one remits the retraction by way of charity, it is an act of atonement for himself. And if any fail to judge by the light of the law, they are the wrongdoers." It seems to me that the cause which he stands in a wider sense has been helped by his...
I am told by pretty good sources that every effort was being made, every excuse was being sought after to find a justifiable way to do exactly what was done. And when he said, "Why did I keep this thing so long to myself and then tell it now?" I'm surprised at him for thinking ill of me for speaking truth. If he had listened to this person malign me and slander me, actually, he would have been able to detect that someone had really poisoned this person. Someone had filled this person's mind with poison to make him think that I was the criminal, that I was a hypocrite. Well, whoever did it was a person who had a full knowledge of what actually had taken place. And it has only been my silence that has created a vacuum that has enabled very skillful people to plant the seed of poison to make it appear to the public that I am wrong and was wrong for having left the Muslim movement. Well, I was silent on it for a long time. And during this silence, I think many people have been led astray and have been misinformed and are right now being misused. So I have no alternative other than to speak it. If they want me to be quiet, then they should keep these little brothers who are ignorant quiet. But from now on, anybody who opens up their mouth on me, I will sting them. And I will sting them with truth, and I'm not particularly concerned with what the consequences may be. And in regards to this gentleman who said, "Why must I teach hate?" I don't think any white person in America is justified with classifying anything that black people in this country teach as hate. The black man is being bitten by your dog that white people are sicking on us. Our heads are being battered with clubs that your policemen are putting up beside our heads. Our women and our children are being washed down sewers by white men who will have hoses in their hands toward us. Now, how in the world can you see us being brutalized and victimized day in and day out, and when we speak out against it, you have the nerve enough to say that that we're teaching some kind of hate? You should be ashamed of yourself. Whether you are, and if you are a Negro who happen to be calling, you are Negro on the outside, but you're white on the inside. Because you have more feeling for the white man than you have for your own kind. How in the world could you see your own people being brutalized as our people are being brutalized? You see the white man in Washington, D.C. right now, every form of political trickery imaginable is being exercised just to keep us from becoming citizens. And you have the audacity to say, I teach hate? No, if truth is hate, then you need a whole lot more of it. I'm just telling you the truth. Take it or leave it.
Done well, American remark.
I left, he imported my blood brother, flesh and blood brother, and put a script in his hand to make him attack me on national television, national radio, and at no time did I open up my mouth to defend myself. And the same thing that I just stated, I knew it then. But I knew my brother was dumb and didn't know what he was doing. He had no knowledge of it. And they used him in his ignorance. So I don't intend to keep my mouth shut and let our people remain ignorant so they can continue to be used, because they'll find some innocent person either committing murder or some innocent person being murdered because of their innocence.
Joe Rainey.
Mohammed, Dr. Nick, and I agree with the gentleman that this was a very poor way of defending himself. I think, as he said, in Africa, and he had a plan to, had he told the people that by them running away was no way of solving the problem, that we have to face it. And I think that is something that should have been done starting about 300 years ago, that we should face the problem. And I think by him making this statement at this late stage in the way that he did, I think was very poor, and I've enjoyed him. I think he's a new man, and I feel that he had a lot of possibilities. But for him to attack and solve this problem this way on the air with no one else to discuss it with him at the time, I think was very poor, and it shows that it's something that we're trying to get away from. In all this fighting that we're doing here, we have to get away from that idea and that way of attacking any problem. And I'd like to know from the gentleman what he intends to do in helping the people of the United States in this new way that he explains in his new understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, but I have to comment again on the first part of her statement before I go back to her question. This right here shows you what is really basically wrong in this society, and also on the part of our people in trying to correct it. I stated from the start that no one has ever defended, and I don't think anybody in America will deny that anyone has ever defended a movement or represented a movement as I have defended and represented the movement to which I formerly belonged. At no time have I attacked it. Now, all someone has to do is pick up any newspaper that has been put out by that movement since I left it. And you will see, once you know the true reason why I left, then you go back and read the type of slander that they put out, and I think you'll have to agree that it was remarkable that I kept quiet as long as I did. And then you also go back and listen to what this young man said. And I happen to know that the man is ignorant. And he says these things only in his ignorance. But I'll tell the world. If they
What young man?
This young man who asked the question as to, rather, who attacked me as a hypocrite.
Whitman X.
Yes, Whitman X. Whitman, yes. Whit. That's a good name for him. And I don't hold it against him because I know what they're doing. And probably the public doesn't realize what is being taught from the various pulpits in most of the temples where I'm concerned. And I'm willing to take whatever consequences are forthcoming for what I'm saying. If I'm not going to bite my tongue in talking about what the white man and others have done, what makes someone think I'll bite my tongue now? I don't bite my tongue on anyone. I kept my peace as long as no one got on the air and attacked me. But when somebody starts attacking me on the air or otherwise, you are attacking a man who will defend himself if it costs him his life and if it costs you your life. Now, insofar as the new way that the lady asked about, one of the things that our people have got to realize is the problem that's confronting us is not the problem that can be approached by an individual organization or an individual person. It's a human problem, and it's a problem for humanity. And until we take the problem out of this civil rights context and study the various human rights findings of the United Nations and these other international bodies, we'll never be able to place the problem in its proper perspective. When we realize it's a human problem, a problem of humanity, then all human beings on this earth will have to work with us to see that the human rights of the black people in this country are respected and protected, as well as the human rights of others are also respected and protected.
I would like to address a couple of brief observations to your guest. First of all,
What is your name?
complete accord with
What's your
his
name?
appraisal of the
You want to tell me your name?
Bob Lambert.
All right, Mr. Lambert.
I'm in a complete accord with his appraisal of the severity of the situation that the Afro-American faces in this country. I will concede to him that he is perfectly correct in supposing that there is complete justification for the Negro in this country to feel spontaneously an emotion at least closely akin to hate of the white person categorically. However, I would like to suggest to Malcolm X that there is a grave logical problem involved in some of what he has said, at least in the past, and I would like him to comment on it. And that is the logical problem of over-induction. That is to say, he is committing, I believe, the same grievous error of reason as has been committed typically by many whites, in fact, most whites categorically. That is to say, hating the one who is not guilty for the sins of those with whom he shares color that are guilty. I think that if I were to find myself fighting any fight with someone because I shared his sense of what was right, and if I were in that very fight to be stabbed by the very man with whom I fought for a common principle, I would need necessarily to regard him as a traitor to both our causes. This is what I fear Malcolm X may be running himself into. To say of all whites that they shall share both the guilt and the hate for the perpetrations of admittedly most whites is to say that whites who fight with you because they agree with you are necessarily to be subject to traitorous treatment on your part. This, I think, is a danger.
Thank you.
Yes, what this gentleman doesn't realize is, first, I don't think you'll ever find any Muslim mentioning anything about hate. I have never heard any Negro in this country use the word hate. This obsession with hate is usually on the part of whites. They're so guilty that they think every black person in this country either hates them or is teaching others to hate them. But this is a guilt complex on the part of whites. They're so guilty that they get this impression. Whenever he's saying, we don't collectively condemn all white people. We are condemning the deeds, the collective deeds of the people in this country who have victimized our people collectively. No, condemn all white people. We are condemning the deeds, the collective deeds of the people in this country who have victimized our people collectively. No, whatever category we are born in, we're still a collective category. Look at Ralph Bunche as an internationally recognized and respected diplomat. But when he was in Georgia trying to attend the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's convention, he couldn't live in a hotel. He was discriminated. Now here's a man who is respected all over the world. But here in America, he's placed in the same category of any other Negro. There was a congressman from Detroit, Diggs, was in a house down in Mississippi, which was bombed. He's in the Congress. Yet he's placed in the same category of all Negroes. The fact that they place him in this collective category makes him the potential victim because of the color of his skin. No matter what he attains, no matter what his academic, his intellectual, or professional level is, he still is in the same category, collective category, and a potential victim as all other Afro-Americans or Negroes in this country. Well, just as we are in the same category collectively because of the system, I think you'll find that white people have to realize that they are collectively guilty, even though as individuals they haven't done it, because they happen to belong to that race that is doing it. Collectively, they're just as responsible as Bunch is part of this collective crime that's being committed against us collectively. If he can't escape as an individual, I don't see how white people think they can escape as individuals. It's a collective problem. And until the problem is solved for all, it hasn't been solved for one. And when you look deeper into it, sir, I think you'll agree that it's the system itself that we call democracy that's absolutely incapable of giving the things to the black people in this country that it gives to white people. Just as the system of a chicken is not capable of producing a duck egg, though both belong to the fowl family. A duck just can't lay a chicken egg, nor can a chicken lay a duck egg, because the system of the chicken isn't so constructed that it will produce a duck egg. Well, just as that can't happen, the system of here in America, the political system, the economic system, is not so constructed that it is capable of producing freedom for the Afro-American. And until you show me where the chicken can lay a duck egg, you will never convince me that this system that we call democracy can produce the fruits of democracy for the black people in this country.
Are you saying at the same time that the Negro should, you say you cast aside the word hate a few minutes ago, should look with ill favor against all white people?
No.
You're
but I
not
think
saying
that we should be cautious.
Yeah. But you're not saying that they should look with ill favor
No.
against all whites. So
I never have said
are you saying that there are no whites in the United States who are friendly to Negro or the Negro cause?
Well, the wolf was friendly to Red Riding Hood when she come knocking at the door. And I think the motive is the thing that she had to examine. And you'll find that in...
Well, are you saying then that no white is friendly with the proper motive?
Well, if they are, and even if they are, I think our people are beginning today to search for the motive. Just these beautiful words that whites shower us with aren't sufficient. You'll find that the average Afro-American...
But what about actions?
...has become, well, we study the actions too, because the motive is the thing. We go for good actions. But at the same time, it is imperative today to study the motive behind those good actions, just like President Kennedy.
Well, we still get to the point that after you do that, do you always find that the motive is an ill motive?
No. Well, any white person who's properly motivated in trying to help the Afro-American get a solution to this problem, I think that properly motivated white person will find himself getting a just reward. But if a reward is all he's looking for, then he's not properly motivated.
But there are such people. That's my point.
Well, probably there are. My search, hasn't...
But you haven't found any?
I haven't searched hard enough, perhaps.
I mean, I'm forced to believe that there are some good white people in the United States.
Well,
I don't think that they're all ill-motivated.
I didn't say that.
Now, I don't know whether, I won't say that we don't have to look far, because they're far and few between, but I still haven't been convinced that there aren't some good ones.
Well, I never would say that there aren't some good ones. But as an Afro-American, I'm only 39 years old. And
in 39 years, you haven't found one?
In 39 years, it has been difficult for me to look back today and find one whose motives I don't suspect.
Joe Rainey. Yes, Reverend.
I just want to say to Malcolm...
You're a stranger.
Huh?
You're a stranger.
Well, I've been asleep, but he said something tonight that
You mean you heard him while you were asleep?
Yeah, he got up on bed. I was laying asleep between sleep and wake, laying there by the radio, and he said something, and he was talking about the man, the girl. Now, one thing I want to say to him, if it is the truth, Malcolm, it is the truth. Only the truth shall make you free. Now, this is one thing that you find among us. They want to do anything, all kind of filth, dirty low down, and hide behind the door, but they don't want it to come out in the open.
That's right, they'll kill you.
Whatever the truth is, it is the truth. And it seems to me that every time you start telling some kind of truth, then especially the female, because it seems to me like there's a psychological block among the female that come out. It seems like it must be some guilt complex in them that bring these things out as soon as you speak about these women, what have been there. Now, if that is the truth, it's the truth. And I don't blame it for standing up for the truth. But I want to call your attention to just one thing. If you will remember when you was here once before, about 6 or 8 months before you separated, and the article was in the Pittsburgh Courier, and I called your attention to it when you're supposed to be moved from Washington. You remember that, Malcolm?
I remember.
All right, I called your attention, and if you remember the last word I said before I hung up, I said this. I said, look to me like this is the beginning of the end. Don't you remember?
Oh, yes, brother.
I never forget a thing. So I just want to compliment you on telling the truth, because when it comes to the truth, it seems to us that our people want to cover up and hide. If our children do something wrong, we want to say, oh, he's a good boy, but he's wrong. If a child is wrong, they're wrong. If the man got the women out of the way, he got them out of the way. He was wrong. That's about it.
Yes, thank you, Reverend, and I'm glad you reminded me of that incident a few months back. This is true. Many people tried to tell me what was coming. And I think that those who tried to tell me will also admit that I was just as sincere then in trying to defend what I knew, in trying to defend the movement that I represented. Even though they were trying to tell me what was coming, I always defended Mr. Muhammad, and I always defended the black Muslim movement. But I think that the whole world will agree that some skullduggery took place. And although I have been covering it up, I don't intend to cover it up. As the Reverend said, if it's the truth, tell it. And it is the truth. I didn't say who was the father of those children, but it doesn't have to, all one has to do is find out, did those 6 teenage sisters actually were they molested? And were they debased? And then were they humiliated? Were they disgraced? And every Muslim in this country who is a member of the Muslim movement, right to this day looks down on them, because the Muslims don't really realize who it was that actually destroyed the virginity, the chastity, and the reputation of those girls, because they stood up and took the blame, knowing that the one that was sentencing them out and humiliating them was the one responsible for their condition. And I think those sisters have to be given credit, and until it's told, the honor will be going in the wrong direction, and the blame will be going in the wrong direction. And this is the thing that preachers in this country have been doing from time immemorial. And until someone stands up and puts a stop to it, it will continue to take place.
Joe Rainey.
Hello, Mr. Rainey?
Yes?
I'll make it short.
Who is this?
My name is Quentin.
No, one call tonight, Quit. One call. I limited everybody to one call in 2
I'll
minutes.
just make one statement, that's it.
Joe Rainey. Yeah, that's not fair, Quit. Joe Rainey.
One thing, Randy, before you go up there, I want two things. I want to say, what can we do to protect the African personality in America? And will Brother Malcolm be appearing here to form some type of, to give a rally in order to project his personality?
His philosophy, okay.
Thank you.
There are many brothers here in Philadelphia and sisters who are interested in the African personality. And steps will be taken within the next month to lay the foundation for a mass rally that we intend to have. And it will be announced right here on this program, the most progressive program in Philadelphia.
Oh, thank you, sir.